Welcome home, brave heroes. I'm Ash, this is HashQuest, and it's Monday, which means it's time for another episode of the BwodeCast. This is the podcast-styled long-form video series centered on talking about all things HeroQuest and HeroQuest adjacent. At least we would be talking about things HeroQuest adjacent if we didn't have so much to talk about that was simply just HeroQuest related. But this week, I wanted to finally bring an end, a closure to the topic that I introduced 2 weeks ago, in which I asked you, kind viewers, your opinions of the Path of the Wandering Monk character expansion and how to interpret its abilities. I wanted to know because in my mind, there are many ways to interpret, or rather many different combinations of the different interpretations that could be quite valid that are in the rule set of the monk through the wording of its cards, the elemental styles, and the cards that describe how to use the elemental styles. So, yeah, in my mind, the question of how to use them is a valid one, and it is one that has more than one valid answer. I made a video exploring the playtest of the Wandering Monk, sort of just to demo it and see how the monk as a solo character might feel when playing in the trial, which is what I love to do. I love to take single heroes and throw them into the grindhouse that is the trial and watch them suffer. The monk, surprisingly or perhaps not surprisingly, did not last beyond the Chaos Warrior / Dread Warrior room. That's where a lot of the other heroes had fallen, and there were a couple of comments pointing out that I could have used or should have used certain abilities in different ways. Well, it is just a playtest video. It's not something to take too seriously. It is based on my interpretation of the rules, not really necessarily what I want to push onto others, but what I think is a valid interpretation based on precedent and my own experience playing the game. And I think that there are going to be differing views that have similar reasonings. So it might be pretty difficult to reason out that two ways can be perfectly valid. But that is the kind of message that I would like to promote on the channel in general. It's not one you have to agree with because, again, I don't want to push a view, but I do think that the way that I'm playing is the way that is best for me. Not necessarily homebrew, not necessarily I'm doing it because I'm Zargon and what I say goes, but because I think that's how it should be played. And the way that you play it could be based on identical reasoning, and yet will arrive at different conclusions. Totally fine, and that actually did happen. Had some comments that turned into quite a bit of a debate in the description, the comments of the video of the Wandering Monk playtest, and it was kept civil, but it really was a back and forth of, well, here's what I think, and here's what I think, and I'm glad when two people can agree to disagree. But enough out of me. I would like to highlight now all of the comments made and all of the discussion made in the Discord, as well as on the comments section, not of that video, but of the post that I made, reaching out to ask people who aren't in the Discord. And of course, I totally encourage you to join the Discord if you have not already. But if you're not one of those people who wants to join an asynchronous chat program and get involved with all that, that is totally fine as well. So let us begin. Then this podcast will be best enjoyed on the road, perhaps listening to while you are painting models or perhaps creating Magic the Gathering card decks. And I always love to hear what people are doing while they're listening to these podcasts. Some folks like to do the laundry or wash dishes, household chores, picking the kids up from school, sneaking at work with an earbud in, listening while you're supposed to be paying attention to your analytics reports. You know who you are. Anyways, let's just get this started. Dan Hopkins, 5429, said, let's just consider the ability to be an action, and the problem is solved. Realistically, you shouldn't have to use one elemental ability per turn. Make him a toolbox that attacks but has an answer when a situation deems his abilities are needed. Jason Summa, 1530, says, there are certain abilities like the trap-related one which makes sense to be reactionary. Others makes more sense to be upfront at the start of the turn. I will still say, regardless of when, that they only last one turn due to how the monk regains the abilities. Sadly, I think the monk is going to need a major errata since there could be so many different views on the abilities. Luca Rock 7866 says, I know Avalon Hill don't like to burden us with too many rules, but I think the monk calls for a little more clarification. He has a new mechanic that is heavily situation specific. I mean, why can't he just play the dodge damage ability every turn? If there are 2 monsters on the board, they very well may be defeated by the time the turn is over. It seems very easy to take advantage of. And Bravo 320ZF says, honestly, I find the base heroes in HeroQuest way too simple. The monk really adds something to the game that I think the game needs. It needs depth, which is why I play a very heavily modified version of HeroQuest. Besides the miniatures, I use almost nothing from the base game. LOL. So, kind viewers, you make sure you weigh in on the posts whenever I put them up. The next video is not going to worry about this stuff here. This is done for this video. So, and we will move into the Discord now, the Amalgam Archive. Again, always free to join. You can join at any time. You can lurk. You can leave at any time without having to say a word. And I asked, just to make it totally clear how I worded this, the monk and their myriad of abilities has certainly caused waves. Whether you think Avalon Hill's newest HeroQuest hero is broken, overpowered, or broken, doomed to fail end game, or rule that his abilities must be used, I really butchered those couple words, at the beginning of a turn, or can be reactionary, there are a ton of points to consider about how this hero is utilized. I think the monk is one of the most complex and fun heroes for this game system yet, but let me know your thoughts for the upcoming BwodeCast. Is the monk too powerful, or did they get screwed over? Hasington says, I'll not have mine till the 12th, but I'm on the if you didn't use an elemental style on your turn, you can activate Twisting Torrent on Zargon's side of the fence, much how I feel about healing spells. I just think it feels simpler and more fluid, which personally is a big part of HeroQuest for me. Ribby says, I think during Kurgan's streams, we've been essentially playing it as you can activate it when it applies, assuming it's not exhausted already, of course. So if you want to use it for an attack, activate it during the attack. Defending? Activate it as part of your defense. Same with movement, etc. Rudolph 666 says, I always say a card text overrules other rules because the card says when you get damage. So I would rule that you could use it as a reaction, but probably say that was your style for your turn, so not be able to use another style for your next movement and action. That one's pretty fair. I kind of like that one. Bohemia says that there is another thing to consider. The monk can't use armor. Without that technique would be extremely weak, and if he had to hold on a technique every turn hoping Zargon will attack him, he'll never use the other techniques to attack. The easiest way for Zargon to deal with the monk would be to just ignore him. Talking about the Twisting Torrent ability, which allows a monk to just negate whatever damage he receives as long as that ability has not yet been exhausted. Hasington makes the point, I mean, he can only negate damage once a turn. 3 orcs could bash him in. Hasington says, I was originally going to say, if you have it, you can activate it on Zargon's turn, but I think I've shifted to only if you haven't used a style on your turn. It's almost the same as the 2-stage system, just without the initial declare. I think that will give monk players less of a chance of activating it needlessly and feeling like they wasted their ability. Focus on fun. That's my mantra. Rudolph responds, my biggest problem with the monk is it's a very powerful character as a fresh starter, but as the group grows, he will not. But more characters have this. C. Kashim says, I agree with this, the card text overruling other rules because the card says when you get damage, but that was your style for your turn, so not able to use another style, your next movement and action. Except Zargon is always last to take a turn in the round, so I wouldn't make it so that using that stops the monk from using the style in the next turn. I'd say in order to use it, the monk has to have not used a style in his previous turn, just as Hasington said. Ward Icon says, I see it as a 1 card per turn, but the elemental styles don't count as an action unless specified. So monk attacks normally, then Zargon hits him, use the negate damage card as defense. Still only used 1. Clarifying it ahead of time lets Zargon attack someone else or just move away, wasting the monk's ability in this situation. Jace says, I don't know what the exact wording is, but I do think what's written on the cards and in Quest does trump the regular rules and or expansion rules. 1 card per turn is what I've been going with. Normal quests would be 4 hero turns and a Zargon turn, meaning 5 turns per round. But I can also see all the heroes' turns count as 1 turn, and then Zargon gets a turn, so 2 turns per round. Most of the cards seem to have a trigger or window of opportunity to use. In the case of Twisting Torrent, I would infer that it can be activated on your turn if you are hit by a hazard, trap, or drink an ogre's grog, or get a wandering monster, only if you have not used another technique on your turn, and it may and most likely will be used on Zargon's turn. To limit the Twisting Torrent card by adding a clause to restrict it to the monk's turn only, it becomes almost useless. There are a few fringe cases as noted above because it has a trigger to use. There are several that don't take up an action, and one that allows you to combine 2 specific search actions. As I have been giving the monk a go, it seems possible to hit fire on the monk's 3rd turn. If all techniques can only be used on the monk's turn, then fire can be used on the 4th turn. Disclaimer, I learned the cards from Verg's downloads as I don't have the actual cards. I'm not an expert, and I've only been playtesting the monk since August of this year. Roughly 25 hours of actual playtime. Ribby says, his abilities almost seem a bit unfair to me. They continuously refresh. He never really loses them. No other hero gets that. I mean, some do to a lesser extent, such as the Bard being able to refresh that one ability whenever rolling 2 white shields, or the Warlock being able to regain demon form when a condition is met. The monk has no such restrictions other than monster line of sight. Seems to break a bit of HeroQuest tradition there. Jace says, maybe the Druid, Bard, and Warlock broke the Spellcaster mold or made a new one. Same with the Knight by getting consumable once per quest skills. The Rogue broke tradition with 3 once per turn skills, and now the Monk gets a turn with 8 possible techniques. Hasington says, the Monk certainly has a lot of flexibility and complexity, but the fact they cannot use gear means they are stuck as a 2 to 3 attack defense, 2 attack dice, 3 defense dice hero. Sure, they have the ability to sometimes hit a 4 and sometimes reduce damage to nothing, but I don't think it's fair to say they are overpowered. I think they'll be a very fun class for those that have played HeroQuest a lot to get into, giving them a more tactical approach on how to play. I'm excited to give one a go. Alright, Jace gives an example of how the monk could be played. On the monk's turn, you choose a style, then during the rest of the round, you wait for an activation window. You may activate a side of the elemental style and perform the technique to exhaust it. Some styles would be straightforward. Here's like a flowchart if you had to test a monk. In a dungeon, choose Earth, open door. Choose technique. Against a monster, use Mountain. Strength of Mountain specifically. This allows you to attack the monster. If there's no monster, use the Speak with Stone in order to search for secret doors and traps as one action, and then exhaust the style. Choose Air. Move towards the monster and either dragon jump, trap, or roundhouse. Choose Water. See if you take damage walking towards the monster, smack them, then either take a step back to exhaust the card or hold it in case you get smacked back to exhaust. Choose Fire. Play tic-tac-toe or death punch the biggin. I actually love how that last one was worded. And I said that I like this line of thinking very much, actually. Choosing the elemental style and then just playing your turn. As others have said earlier in the conversation, there is a perception that this kind of doesn't feel like HeroQuest, but I would argue that the monk in general is breaking molds that to many may not feel like HeroQuest, and to a lot of people it might actually be following a lot more closely to a homebrewed version of a hero. Hasington says, I can understand the line of thinking, but I still prefer the idea of just using an ability as and when you want to, choosing the style at that moment. I've not heard a playstyle that I would argue back at a Zargon, though. They all feel usable. Jay says, this is one playstyle that could be frustrating. My biggest advice would be to go D&D Session 0 on it, so it does not start an argument mid-game. Same as getting a clarification if each player gets a turn, or if each round of play is only 2 turns, heroes and Zargon. This is even more fringe case, but for example, Command, Werewolf Curse, or collateral damage on another hero's turn, where the monk could be damaged by the hero, triggering an AoE trap. Dan the Colombian says, not sure if it's been thought through already, but I've got a combo I want to submit to the Zargons of the world. On turn 1, move, attack with weapon, activate Strength of Mountain, roll 2 additional dice on an unarmed attack. Turn 2, move into a heap of monsters, activate Eye of the Storm. As an action, make 1 unarmed attack against all adjacent enemies, adding +2 from the Strength of Mountain last turn. Use Twisting Torrent on Zargon's turn defensively. Turn 3, move into position and blast Burning Spirit or activate Touch of Endless Inferno and casually walk out of line of sight. So here, Dan the Colombian is suggesting that we could activate Strength of Mountain at the end of our turn after we have used our movement and our action. We use the movement, the action, then we select the elemental style. And then in turn 2, the buff that we gain, the ability with its specific conditions and activation in the previous turn, is applied, and then we use 1 elemental style, which takes on the buffs of the previous elemental style. I wouldn't call this outright wrong, but I do think that the cards having you select 1 elemental style, choose 1 elemental style per turn, kind of makes this feel brood. I think that we are disallowed from choosing more than one style or activating more than one style per single turn. So if the elemental style has an effect, it is activated. Then again, if you really want to split hairs, if you really, really want to get down into literal rules, it says, after use, the elemental style of Earth is exhausted, and you didn't use it, and it doesn't say that rolling 2 additional attack dice on an unarmed attack is in and of itself an action. I mean, there are a lot of things here to read on the cards to say, well, obviously they meant this, or obviously they mean that. I mean, that we have precedent, we know what they mean. But technically, we don't. Technically, the cards simply aren't worded very well at all. Technically, the cards could have used a lot of vetting to be more clear if the designers were aiming to be clear on exactly what the elemental styles versus actions versus turns and all of that can do. Technically, they really, really could use a second edition or an official errata. There's going to be people who, like in my playtest of the Monk video, comment down below and they say things along the lines of, are you stupid? It's clear that it means this. Of course you're not going to be able to do this. But just like the comments in that video, there won't be conclusive evidence of those opinions. They're just valid takes that aren't invalidated because of the vagueness and the ambiguity of the rules stated on the cards and the ambiguity of HeroQuest in general. But back to the comments. Mr. Big B says, I think at my table we would let the elements stack and the above sequence would look more like turn 1, move, activate Strength of Mountain, roll 2 additional dice on an unarmed attack and attack a monster. Turn 2, move into a heap of monsters, activate Eye of the Storm. As an action, make 1 unarmed attack against all adjacent enemies. Use Twisting Torrent on Zargon's turn defensively, and turn 3, move into position and blast Burning Spirit and casually moonwalk out of the line of sight. Ribby says moonwalk allows you to take 2 He tokens. Thanks, Ribby. That's a contribution. And so that pretty much wraps up the BwodeCast Q&A section of the Discord and all of the discourse that has been lent into this week's BwodeCast. I hope that you guys found this entertaining or found some additional ideas. If you needed any to play your monk character, I've got a little bit more coming up about the monk. I have one video specifically that I just got done editing, and I think that you'll have some fun with that one. It won't be anything too controversial. Other than that, I think that this definitely has been a very interesting and dynamic character, and the amount of discussion that it has generated, I think, has really outweighed the amount of discussion that we've had on any other HeroQuest related topic. And I don't mean just me and my community or how I interact with the existing communities. I mean, I think that this thing has really been dug into and has really been cross-analyzed and will continue to be analyzed as long as there will continue to be edge cases that make things that didn't make sense before suddenly make sense now, and vice versa. So I thank everybody for joining me on this week's BwodeCast. This does actually seem to be a little bit of a shorter one, which is pretty bizarre considering all the content that I had to read through and go over. But feel free to lend whatever additional thoughts you like down below, and I will see you in the next one. I currently do not have a BwodeCast topic. I would like to kind of make this the last one for the year, unless something crazy happens and we get another leak or something like that to talk about, thus making it the end of BwodeCast for this season. So I will see you guys whenever the next one comes up. And if you'd like to chat about stuff in a casual manner, of course, you can join the Discord where we hang out. Make sure to join the Patreon at whatever tier you wish to have your name included in the credits of these videos, just like these awesome people that are about to pop up. Have a great rest of your day, and bye for now, brave heroes.